Welcome to Journey to the Oasis, the space where the next generation of leaders, visionaries, and disruptors come together to shape the future. Virtual is more than coaching, it's a movement. We're building the number one community for human potential on planet Earth, with the mission to help you design a life you truly love, one filled with clarity, alignment, and impact. Through portal sessions, our one-on-one coaching, we equip those who are ready to lead, connect, and build what's next. My name is Remington Rodney, and since 2018, I've been on this path of transformation. Now I serve as your guide here in the Oasis, creating space for leaders like you to step fully into your potential. Today, we're diving into a conversation that beautifully bridges ancient wisdom and modern science with someone who's been shaping the global conversation around integrative medicine for over 3 decades, Dr. Sheila Patel. Dr. Sheila is a board certified family physician, chief medical advisor at the Chopra Foundation, and chief medical officer at Gaja Collective. She's also a certified Ayurvedic health consultant and meditation instructor, blending ancient traditions with modern innovation to redefine what it means to heal. For more than 30 years, she's guided thousands through the principles of Ayurveda, meditation, and yoga, helping people restore balance, vitality, and consciousness in their daily lives. Her philosophy centers on transforming healthcare from a system of disease management into one of creating health and human potential. Her upcoming book, Awaken Sleep, offers an Ayurvedic perspective on restorative rest, a key that unlocks our highest energy and clarity. Beyond that, she's deeply passionate about the decolonization of medicine, reawakening indigenous wisdom, and reminding the world that true healing always begins in the heart. Dr. Sheila, welcome to Journey to the Oasis.
Thank you. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you on. I know it took us some time to make it happen, but it's divine timing. And
Absolutely.
I want to just first invite our audience to really step into a place of presence for this conversation. This conversation has the power to truly transform you and heal you and deepen your essence and connection to self. So to kick things off, Dr. Sheila, in a time when so many people are searching for meaning, purpose, and connection, Ayurveda reminds us that healing begins with remembering who you are. How did you first come to remember that truth for yourself, and how has it shaped the way you now teach and serve?
That's such a great question. Yeah, I feel like that's really been my journey in life, and the happiest I've ever been is now that I've really embraced who I am, and have just really aligned my life and what I teach and what I talk about with that. But it's been a journey, as most things are, I think, for all of us. But my parents came from India, and so they immigrated here in the 60s, and I was born here in the States, and they brought with them all of our rich traditions and
Mm,
spirituality and foods and, practices. And but I grew up here, and so what we did in the inside in our home was very different. I would step outside, and it was like all the American culture and society, and so
sure,
I kind of had this duality. There was my inside life and my outside life, and uh, also then along with my career, and you compartmentalize. That's what we do, right? And it worked for a while. I just thought, oh yeah, this is what Indian people do, and this is what other people do, and but it's really hard to have this duality, right? Like, because we're one person. And so how do you integrate all of that? And then just as a side note along my way, I was good in school and I liked science. I loved science. And so I knew from an early age that medicine or health was my path. I think I was lucky that way. A lot of people don't always know that. I just had this inner kind of sense that that's what I wanted to do. And interestingly, in our modern medical training and even scientific training, it's one way of knowing things. It's very like scientific, evidence-based, reductionist, material world, what we can see, touch, feel. And from a spiritual perspective, in Eastern traditions, and my family's sort of philosophies were more expansive than that and included things like what we might consider superstitious or irrational or, woo woo. And the more I got into medicine, the language, and again, graduated medical school 30 years ago, and it's still there now, but even more so then. If you said things like, you know, the evil eye, or, things that a lot of cultures recognize, or
Sure.
hands-on healing, or auras, and things like that, like people would say, you don't belong in medicine. What are you talking about? This is crazy. And so I kind of shut out a lot of what I had learned throughout my life. And, my mom had cooked in a certain way, and this is good for your digestion, and et cetera. A lot of these ideas we grew up with, and they didn't seem strange to me, but I didn't talk about any of that. So you end up suppressing a lot of who you are, right, along the
Mm,
way. And because I wanted to be taken seriously as a doctor, and I am evidence, I do follow the evidence. I am a scientist. And even the pendulum swung to the point where I was even, like, embarrassed, or, like, didn't wanna acknowledge any of the things that, like, my mom used, home, remedies, or, you know, some of these other healing principles or therapies. And it was about 10 years into medicine. Yeah, I did family medicine, and I worked in remote settings. I was in Alaska for 4 years, and then I grew up in Wisconsin, so I went back to the rural area and loved primary care. And I still practice primary care 1 day a week. I see patients in an office, but I was doing it like full time, delivering babies and all
mm,
the things we say, births to death. But after about 10 years, I realized I only have a few tools in my toolbox. And
mm.
people would come to me and I didn't have answers, and I didn't like that, and then
Sure.
around that time, integrative medicine was coming to be, and people were getting information, and books were being written, um, by who ended up to be one of my mentors synchronistically, Deepak Chopra, and a lot of pioneers in mind body medicine, and patients would bring me these books, and I'm just naturally curious. So I would read these books and say, "Oh, there's something to that." And especially with Deepak's writing, it synced with what I knew and felt to be true from my tradition. And so then I just started a long journey toward, what is healing? And along the way, I kind of found myself, because what my parents and our tradition comes from India, as does Ayurveda, which is a traditional healing system. And
Mhm.
it's based on this mind, body, spirit approach to health and healing. And it incorporated so many things about what I grew up with, but also personal experiences that all of a sudden I had answers to, and patient experiences that I had answers to. So it just opened up an entire world for me. And once you open, the box, you can't stuff yourself back into it. So
Yeah.
now I've just followed that journey wherever it takes me, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I think it was multiple things that kind of got me to where I am now.
Yeah, and I think there's multiple points in there I wanna touch on. First, just having that knowingness at such a young age. Hey, I
Yeah.
wanna help others,
Yeah.
specifically in the medical field, and, of course, now it's evolved into Ayurveda, healing, working with people like Deepak Chopra. Um, it's crazy, though, because you started out, like, receiving that wisdom growing up as a child,
Mhm.
and Western society oftentimes kind of suppresses, numbs, some of our beliefs, especially as we get older. We're told this isn't the right way, this is the path. Why? It's scientifically proven. Here's the data. But
Mm.
spirituality breaks outside of the box in so many different ways. It's not logic, it's feeling, it's
Right.
intuition.
Exactly.
So I just love that. It sounds like you use while you're self healing yourself, you started to embrace these other traditions in Eastern medicine.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's exactly right. And you hit on a couple of points that I'll, expand on a bit, because Ayurveda, for people who don't know, it is a traditional healing system. It was first described in India, but it's very similar to a lot of indigenous cultures and their healing traditions, because it's based on nature, and we're part of nature. So how does nature function through us? And some of the terms and the words and the language may be different, but they all are trying to describe the same thing,
Mm,
how we function as whole human beings. They're much more holistic than what we do in Western medicine. And Western medicine's great for the physical body and physical issues that are going on, like emergency care and uh, surgeries, etc. And I've seen we all have seen miraculous things we can do in medicine. But as we've also seen chronic diseases on the rise, mental health, we're having a crisis, and spirituality. I think this disconnect from each other, from the planet, from
mm,
ourselves and our inner voices and, chasing things that other people think are important to us, like that's a spiritual crisis. And so Ayurveda is about integrating body, mind, spirit, and understanding that we have experiences in all of those aspects. And there are tools for every layer of our life experience. And so purpose and meaning, those sorts of things have more to do with our, people call it different things, spirit, soul, our inner self. And it's only through that exploration of the inner self can we actually, I feel, come into our purpose and, kind of understand why we're here. And
sure.
the more I practice medicine, yes, the body is very important, and Ayurveda has all kinds of tips to take care of the body and prevent disease, and actually for longevity. A lot of Ayurveda was about, speaking of our potential, reaching our
Mm,
full human potential. That's
yes.
why we do the things we do, and lots of practices for mental health. And, so now I've realized, oh, the mind, that creates our physiology. And so we have to watch our thoughts and manage our emotions. But even deeper than that is this thing we call spirit. In the Vedic philosophy that Ayurveda comes from, it's called consciousness. And it's in this realm that, we can connect to purpose and meaning and who we really are. And that's actually the biggest driver. And that's where our happiness comes from. So I've just moved further and further along, asking those deep questions, helping people find their purpose. But you have to meet people where they're at. If they come with a physical problem, we start there. If they come with, some stress or mental health issues, we start there. But the journey is really about going beyond all of that.
I feel like that's such a mind-blowing, uh, just like exploration for someone that started out in very traditional medicine to now you're slowly discovering like, whoa, there's this whole new world out there to heal the body and most importantly, like you said, connect the mind, the body, and the soul, which is this aspect of wholeness. What were some of the crazy discoveries as you were kind of making that
I
transition from Western to Eastern
I gotta tell you
philosophy?
this. Yeah, I gotta tell you this story. I love this story, and it just answers that question in many ways. So, as I mentioned, and this kind of ties in decolonization because that is kind of a new thing that I've been exploring, and I
Mm,
recently finished a chapter that it's going to be in an academic text. I don't know when it's coming out, but it's about decolonization of medicine, and each chapter is about a different indigenous tradition or culture, and I am just contributing the one on Ayurveda. Uh, but I explored a lot of things in there that really answered a lot of questions about myself, about why, when I grew up with all of these things, all of a sudden I didn't even want to talk about it. I was embarrassed to talk about it. And so much of that does come from this active suppression of traditional cultures and traditional knowledge. And not even just suppression, but a demarginalization
mhm,
and a less than, even to the people where these traditions come from. It's a really interesting conditioning that goes on. And so I bring that in because this happened to me as I went along medicine, and I thought, oh yeah, all those things that my mom did. By the way, now we have science to show why all these things work. She used to put turmeric paste on her sprained ankles, and now we know, like, turmeric is one of the best anti-inflammatories in the world and or on the planet. And so she would make a particular paste with certain ingredients, and now we know those help us to absorb that into the skin. So it's really exciting time to be doing this because all the science is just validating what and each culture around the world had their plants that they used and different things that were available to them. But so one thing in particular, though, which is only just now, well, in the last decade or two being studied. So I had my first child, and my mom was there for the birth and stayed with me for 2 months afterwards. And my when my baby was about, I don't know, yeah, 3 weeks old or so, we took him out in the stroller, and with his dad, we were walking along this sidewalk promenade, and and people were passing by. It was, a nice, beautiful day, lots of people walking by. And she kept pulling the stroller, the sunshade, so that, he would be covered. And then, my husband would like kind of push it back. And then we'd walk a little further and she'd kind of pull it back again. And then maybe pull the blanket up a little over him. And then my husband would kind of pull it back because he wanted him to get some sunshine or whatever. And he's like, why is your mom doing that? And he didn't come from India. So he said, why is your mom doing that? Does she not, the sun is fine, blah, blah, blah. And so I asked her, I'm like, well, why do you keep doing that? And she said in our language, I don't want anyone to give him the evil eye, and that's why I brought that up.
Mm.
And I said, "Oh, no, now I have to say this to my husband." He's like, "What'd she say?" I'm like, seeing it kind of rolling my eyes like, "Oh, she's afraid someone's gonna give him the evil eye." And he, had an appreciation that we have these superstitions, so he was like, "Oh, okay, I see. Well, tell her everything will be fine." And we just kept going. And she would do other things that had to do with what we realize now is really energy,
Mm.
and so jump forward. And I thought too, like all of these things were just weird things that Indian people did, and this evil eye, and it's all superstition, right? There's no logic to it. Well, jump forward after I started working at the Chopra Center. This is when I made a big transition in my life. I just knew as I was practicing medicine, this isn't healing. I'm not really helping people. And again, there was like
Mm.
this little voice that we need to listen to, even if it doesn't make any logical sense, right? And I made a big jump into making a move to California. And, when you grow up in the Midwest and you move to California, they're like, why are you going where all the crazies are?
Yep, yep.
And
Can
what are you
relate.
doing? You're doing this Ayurveda or this integrative health, and, your doctor friends don't take you seriously. And again, it takes a lot to make a change like that, right? From what everybody else thinks you should be doing. Even some of my Indian relatives, and especially some of them, because of this concept of decolonization, were like, what are you doing? Western medicine is, better, or what have you. So anyway, that's the background. So I just had time now in my life to research things, and I was learning yoga, and I just started doing a lot of research and looking at science out there. And one day I was looking through these articles, and I came across an article that said electromagnetic validation for the evil eye. And I was like, oh my
Whoa.
gosh, maybe my mom was right. So I read this study, and essentially it was, one study, but now there's more and more out there, biofield, and we do have an electromagnetic field around us that can explain some of these things we call an aura or what have you, right? But this researcher had created these goggles where he would have people have different emotions. He'd say, okay, now think of something that makes you angry, think of something that makes you happy. And they would be looking through these goggles, and it was measuring the electromagnetic and, the waves of energy that were coming out of your eyes. Because in the back, when doctors dilate your eye and look, we can actually see the cranial nerve there, the optic nerve, and there it's a direct relation into the brain.
Mm.
And actually into parts of the brain that do have to do with emotions. And, we can get into the science a lot deeper, but essentially the electromagnetic waves that come out of our eyes are different depending on our emotions, right? And that's why when you look at someone
Wow.
in the eye, you can tell if they're scared, if they're mad. And we think it's because their eyes are, small or big, but it's actually even more subtle than that. So he wasn't studying Ayurveda or yoga or anything, but this researcher was just documenting that, yes, there might be some validity to this concept that we can influence someone else's energy by how we look at them. And now we know even how we think about them and how we feel about them. And, and I think that's most people's experience, right? When you're with someone, you feel stuff that's
Definitely.
energy. So that kind of was an interesting thing to me, where it really broke open this thing like, wow, maybe there is validity to all of these things that traditional cultures did, like hug trees or chant or, and like literally any of those traditions, if there's anything that people have, out there do in their own traditions, there's likely some scientific, at least validation for why that works.
Yeah. Well, shout out to your mom. Sounds like she has a ton of wisdom and just
Yeah.
knew before everyone, but that's yeah, it's I've heard the evil eye. I think I would say like the Gen Z generation is a lot more like accepting to some of these concepts and
Yeah.
energy.
Yes.
And I can even speak on like my experience here in Bali.
Mhm.
Ubud is probably one of the most it's a spiritual city, right? And
So
you've
much, yeah.
gotta have a strong intuition. Like when
Yes.
you're in places in the world that have such strong energy, you have to be able to intuitively read the field and make decisions from that. And often it's
Yes.
within relationships too. You have to learn how
Yes.
to protect your energy anywhere in the world, and I think that's been a huge part of my journey is being able to delineate between certain relationships that I should discard from my life or allow enter because you never
Right.
know what's going to happen, but you've got to trust that feeling. You've got to trust that
Yeah.
knowingness in your body.
And I think it's just such a Western world or US or I don't know, in other kind of countries, but here for sure, that's not at all valued. In fact, in medicine and Ayurvedic physicians are trained to meditate, to listen, to sense.
Wow.
And one of the things about this decolonization and colonization is this concept that there's only one way to know. There's a term for that. How do we know? There's like a whole the study of how we know things. And there are certain ways to know things through, material sort of laws of physics, etc., and evidence and logic. That's one way to know things. But that doesn't mean it's any better than how we know things through sensing and feeling. And in fact, most of our actions are our behaviors are from that emotional brain, how we feel about something and what we sense. This doesn't sense, feel right to me. And so that is another way of knowing. And so many other cultures around the world, like these concepts are not strange. They're embedded in the culture.
Yes,
But I think, when in this concept, when other peoples come to these places, that sort of minimization of that traditional way of doing things is needed to get power, right? And control over over
of
a place.
course. Of
And
course.
so, yeah, when you just start traveling, you just start realizing that these are all parts of normal life and normal conversations all over the world. In fact, my friend lives in Sri Lanka now, and we were just catching up, and she said, every full moon, the restaurants and places, like, they don't serve alcohol or certain things, I mean, that's just one example, but, that's just what they do, in the culture, and it's just so much more aligned with spiritual things and nature, and, it's just part of life, and it's taken me a while to catch up, because here that it's really people don't, value that intuition, and we're actively taught in medicine, don't go by your gut feeling, use algorithms, like, everything's our head and our brain.
Wow.
And
That's crazy.
actually yeah, no, and actually, people have been starting to study that most doctors are making choices based on that, but we're not trained on how to use that, so it's a little here and there and everywhere. So meditation's been a really important practice in my life. I learned to meditate. My mom taught us how to meditate, and then I didn't meditate for periods of time in my life, and then when I started back at the Chopra Center, it was amazing. Deepak Chopra, who started the center here in California with Dr. David Simon, who was also my mentor, they were two physicians who were trained in the Western medical model, who now were talking about things like this, and that that's what I needed. So I think it's really important for people to find mentors and to find people that
Hmm.
that have come before us. People have fought certain battles, and we can align with that and find people to mentor us. That was really important for me.
What were some of the most valuable lessons that you took from learning from Deepak and Dr. Simon?
Gosh, so many. I think one big one was moving and integrating my head with my heart. So that has to do with this intellect, yes, is important. We can solve problems and use our cognitive mind, but how do we also use our heart and our gut, and presence, and combine those two for decision making and helping people heal, because so much of people's healing isn't about, here, take this medicine, or I can teach you this, or go do this. It's about just listening and presence. And another story, quick story I'll tell you, there was a woman, after I stopped doing ER medicine and delivering babies and taking care of patients in the hospital, as a doctor, that's the exciting, like, oh, you saved a life, woo. And then when I left all of that, it was a little sad for me. And you know, and then I was taking care of a woman in a primary care in my office, and she came in and she had diabetes, and she had stopped all her meds, and she was obviously depressed, and she was new to me. And so the first thing we had to do was get her body back on track. Her sugars were way out of control. That's a life-threatening situation. So
Yeah.
we did that, and we could have stopped there, but I just simply asked her, like, you seem down, and she just started crying, 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 because I just opened up the conversation, and then we started, we gained this trust, and she shared with me many things, and I got her into counseling, and it ended up, she let her meds run out. She wasn't taking care of herself because she was in an unhealthy relationship. She didn't like her job. Her mood, she was depressed. And then we started working on that. And ultimately what that led to was, I just asked the question, like, when you were a kid, what did you want to do, or what inspires you? And it was working with young women and empowerment. And unfortunately, because of our crazy insurance system, I got a letter one day that said, "Oh, Dr. Patel, I'm really sorry I can't see you anymore. My insurance changed. It's
Mm,
covered anymore." And she wrote this beautiful letter that said, "But thank you so much." And at the end of it, she said, "I hope one day you can save another girl's life." And it really struck me because I was like, "Oh, you can save lives in many ways," like going through
yes.
the world in a haze, is that life, and so I just thought that was super interesting, that getting her connect. Oh, and then she also wrote, she had left her job, she had left the relationship along the way. She stopped some of the unhealthy habits she'd been doing, and she started working on teenage girls and doing workshops on empowerment and really stepping into her purpose. And
It's
that
amazing.
that saved her life. And I mean, I don't take credit. It's just being present and allowing people that opportunity to find themselves. And that's what all these ancient rishis, and that's what they did. They were all about self-exploration and stepping into our purpose and our potential as humans. We can do so much, but we have to be allowed to.
Such a beautiful story, and it starts with your curiosity and humanness, right? You noticed within that individual this sadness, this discomfort, and you created a safe space for her to verbalize that, to be vulnerable. And I think we forget how powerful that safe space is and how important it is for everyone, no matter how achieved you are, no matter how abundant you are. Being able to have a friend, a coach, a doctor, a mentor that can be a mirror, right, and help you
Absolutely.
unlock or just remove the gunk, really, because that's
Yes.
what healing is about, right? There's a lot of
Yes.
stuck energy in your body, and
Yes.
you've got to move it around. And so I think Ayurveda is such a beautiful practice for that because it goes beyond really the logical mind and dives deep into within.
Yeah, and I think that, again, those are things I learned from Dr. Simon and Dr. Chopra, and then along the way, other mentors that I had, and just Ayurveda, addressing body, mind, spirit, addressing true healing. And it's exactly what you said in Ayurveda. There's just two things that all of these practices do. We hear about all these Ayurvedic practices, tongue, cleaning and oil pulling and neti and, you know, um, putting oil on your skin, all of these, but they're not these individual, just random practices. They're all meant to do one of two things or both: remove what's getting in the way of our self-healing, like you said,
Mm,
gunk, uh, and or so we have to get rid of the junk and we have to bring in nourishment. And that nourishment can be in the
yes.
form of food, it can be in the form of nourishing relationships, nourishing thoughts about ourselves, nourishing, gratitude, and all of these healthy things, thoughts, foods, products on our skin. So that's it. We're removing what's getting in the way and we're supporting our self healing. And what naturally will emerge is health, or it'll move in that direction, health and happiness, because that is what we are. And it's unfortunate things just get in the way. And, that's why moving into the concept of sleep, sleep is very important to unlock our potential. And that's why I co-wrote this book with actually one of my Ayurvedic mentors, Dr. Suhas Kshirsagar, who's an amazing Ayurvedic physician. He's classically trained from India, but he's been practicing in the West for also 30 plus years.
Mm,
And we wrote this book to give people an Ayurvedic perspective on sleep. And science validates none of it is new. I always say it's making the old new again. But in Ayurveda, they knew all of these things. Sleep is a biological necessity. Without sleep, we can't be healthy. Um, but it dives even deeper into what happens when we sleep from a mental health and even a spiritual perspective. And sleep is so important to get good, natural, healthy sleep. Uh, I've rarely used medications anymore to help people sleep. It used to be, people came in and said they can't sleep, we give them a medication. But
right.
number one, that can actually interfere with certain normal stages of sleep. And number two, a lot of those drugs now are being linked to dementia and, reduced cognitive functioning.
Mm,
Um, and so we need to go through these certain phases of sleep to activate our creativity, and many, many things come out of sleep. So many books and songs and mathematical equations, came to people in their sleep, or you get a good night's sleep and all of a sudden, you have all these creative ideas. And uh, so in Ayurveda and in, the Vedic philosophies that are associated with Ayurveda, there's a lot of importance placed on natural restorative sleep. So yeah, that was the sort of inspiration behind writing the book.
let's talk more about the book and just sleep in general, because sleep is, I feel like for the past few years, I always struggled with sleep, like living in the States, going to bed at like
Yeah.
11 p.m. to like maybe like 1 p.m. Now I'm
Mhm.
in a completely different world here in Bali where I get up at 4 a.m. and I'm going to
Mhm.
bed at 9:30. That's just me, the high performer that's wanting that extra time to meditate, to just put in the extra hours to grow my business. But there are some days, even this week, where I'm like, damn, like a couple weeks ago, I was getting up at 4 a.m. and I had this energy, but the past couple days, it's 9 a.m. or it's 2 p.m. and I'm feeling irritable,
Yeah.
and I just like me selfishly curious just about how do we leverage Ayurveda and the philosophy that you've implemented to optimize our health?
Yeah, I mean, sleep is such an interesting thing because we've gotten so disconnected from our normal rhythms, circadian rhythms, which is our daily rhythm, and it goes along with the sun and, sunrise, sunset, and the day and night, the rotation of the earth. And it's so interesting that you found that. I'm sure being in Bali, you've been able to align with more with like the natural cycles, as the sun's
Hmm.
coming up. And that is when our cortisol starts to rise around 4 to 6 a.m. And so in Ayurveda, there's certain times of the day. And again, it was described in a different language, but very brilliantly. And this is what science is confirming too. So cortisol starts to rise. So if we get up during those hours, like ideally by 6 o'clock or 7, I mean, there's some leeway there, but 6 to 7. And it depends on sometimes where you are on the planet, because when you're closer to the equator, it's different than if you're at the poles. But these are in general. that's when our cortisol is starting to rise. So if we get up during those times, we're going to feel a little more alert. The longer you wait at 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., it's what we call kapha time. It's a little heavier. Like if you look outside, it's cooler, there's dew, the air is a little heavier, and
Mm-hmm.
our digestion is slower. So when we wake up, even if we sleep more hours, but you wake up at 8, 9 a.m., you feel more sluggish because it's a different time that there are different energies and different times of the day. And then from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is what we call pitta time. It's fire. In the morning, it's earth and water, kapha. Fire is during, that middle of the day when ideally we should be up and be active using that fire to digest our biggest meal of the day, lunch. And that's why sometimes if you wake up during those times, you might feel a little heated up or angry, irritable. And so, and then it cycles back again to what we call vata time, air and space, between 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. This is when our nervous system's a little activated. We're feeling a little scattered. So that's why typically a meditation, or I always do some deep breathing at the end of that time, like between 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., to just kind of slow down from my day. And then we're moving back into 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., that earth and water kapha time again, where we naturally slow down, our digestion slowing down, now our melatonin's starting to go up, as the light goes down from the sun, the less bright sun. And now we're getting sleepy, so we can go to sleep by 9 or 10, maybe latest 11. And most people will notice if you're not totally wired from caffeine, stress, overstimulation, of the senses, we do get tired around that time. But
Yeah.
if we push through it, then we get a second wind. Now we're back in pitta time. So now we're awake again and we can focus and do work. But what we're missing out on is that 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. while we're sleeping is when we get most of our deep sleep stages. That's when cell regeneration is happening, DNA repair, new tissues formed, healing is happening, cellular metabolism, cholesterol metabolism. There's so much activity when we're asleep going on. And then 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., we want to, is when a lot of our REM sleep or dream sleep is happening. And that's when we do our emotional processing. And that's why sometimes people will wake up during that time after 2 a.m., 2, 3 a.m., if they're, you know, dealing with something emotional because, we're kind of processing that. Memory consolidation is happening during these times. So there's so much happening that we do want to be asleep during that, especially 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. But if you're getting good sleep, waking up at 4 or 5 can be very, you feel energetic and fine. That's actually appropriate. And so Ayurveda puts more emphasis on the quality of the sleep than the quantity.
Mm.
Even though we know in brain science, in general, we want to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But if you are getting deep or good restorative, restful sleep, you might need less. Ayurveda is a personalized approach to health. So there are different mind body types, and each one has different needs. So there isn't one size fits all. That was another like game changer for me, because in medicine we do the same thing for everybody, but in Ayurveda we're like, no, everyone's different, so you can't do the same thing for everybody, and that includes sleep rules. But that's in general kind of the Ayurvedic approach, and that's why when you're aligned more with nature, then our biological rhythms and hormones can be more in balance, and we maximize really our potential during sleep. And I'll also just one little simple phrase, as we know, the quality of our night will dictate the quality of our day, right?
Mm.
But the quality of our day will dictate the quality of our night. So in a lot of modern sleep science, we hear this sleep hygiene, the 2 or 3 hours before bed, don't eat a big meal, dim the lights, take a warm bath. Yes, all helpful. But it starts from the moment you wake up. You have to have a day that sets you up for good sleep. They say look at the morning sun or look at the sky in the morning. It sets your circadian clock. And then watch your sensory input all throughout the day. Watch your thoughts all throughout the day. Because a lot of it has to do with the nervous system. If our senses are overloaded, and for you and many people living in the States, it's just constant overstimulation.
Yeah.
and of our senses, visually, auditory, just constant noise. Um, and then by the time you get to sleep, even if you're doing practices for 2 hours before bed, the nervous system is just hyped up and hyper aroused, over aroused, we say. And so it's really hard to get to sleep. So the thing about Ayurveda is really about creating a healthy lifestyle. And then your digestion and your body is good, your sleep is good, your mood is good. And so people will see in the book, we get into a lot of just what do you do from the moment you wake up? And people are like, wait a minute, this is a book about sleep, but because that will dictate your night. Yeah.
I really appreciate that breakdown. I love that all of it connects to nature and its elements as well. And it seems to be a commonality within Ayurvedic practices. And I think we are nature, right? That's something Ram Dass constantly was sharing
Absolutely.
within his message. And you mentioned the tree hugging, like all of that stuff is so real.
Yes.
Um, and I mean, we got to touch on too, like probably one of the biggest killers for good sleep is social media and technology before bed and when you wake up. It's just
Yes.
never a good thing, right?
No.
The unworthiness comes up, the shame comes up, the guilt comes up, the disconnection from self comes up. I know it because I've lived it so often, something I've now decided to put to the side. But of course, there's moments when we still grab to it. But I think
Yeah.
that always has to be said, like prioritize the most important technology system, which is your heart.
100%. That's a great place to start where people are like, "Oh, well, what do I do?" And it's more challenging now than ever, not only with like the amount of work that people are expected to do in a day, which is unreasonable, honestly. Um, 2 weeks of vacation in a year. I mean, no, like
Yeah.
societies were built before on you work and then you have rest. And then, of course, with electronics and social media, I mean, we can constantly be overstimulated, distracted, and then, as you mentioned, all of the emotions that come up with that. So yeah, what you said, focus on your heart. So what I started doing, the first thing I do when I wake up, well, I really connected to breath work and,
Beautiful.
slowing down your breath slows
Yes.
down your mind. So if there's anyone out there who's like, oh, I have anxiety or my thoughts keep me up, slow rhythmic breathing. And it can be super simple. It doesn't have to be any of these complicated things. Focus, you can even put your hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. I think putting your hands on your body really bring you,
Hmm.
inward. And then you just, breathe in slowly for 4 or 5 seconds, hold for 1 second or so, and then breathe out for the same amount, 4 or 5 seconds. And then you just rhythm. Our body, when we're overstimulated, loves rhythm. Think about kids, rocking, swaying back and forth. Like we like
Hmm.
rhythm. Rhythm is comforting. So just do slow rhythmic breathing, slowing the breath down to about 5 to 7 breaths a minute. So if you breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 5 seconds, that gets you there. And that will calm the nervous system. And all of this breath work's been studied. It helps reduce anxiety. And in yoga, the yoga tradition, they've always said the mind follows the breath. So if you slow down your breath, you will slow down the mind. So I just learned as soon as I wake up in the morning and I just, if I'm not on my back, I roll over my back, put my arm, hands on my heart and my chest, and I just feel my breath. And I just like, how am I breathing? And if you had a restless night, you might notice you're breathing a little short and shallow. So you could do a few minutes of slow rhythmic breathing before anything. Just do that right away, first thing in the morning. And then you get up. Ideally, do a little meditation. You might get up and, relieve yourself so you're not distracted by that. But then you sit down, you do some centering, grounding, because that's how you're going to start your day. Like you
Yeah.
said, if the first thing you do is like, look at the social media and like, scroll, 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 that's what your day will be like, right? And then same thing before bed. I teach all my patients do 5 to 10 minutes of slow rhythmic breathing, as you're laying in bed. And there are different things, body awareness, where you progressive muscle relaxation, where you progressively you go from your feet up to your head or vice versa. And you just bring your awareness there and you relax that area and you slowly move up. But I like breath work. Again, by breath work, I just mean, in this setting, it's slow rhythmic breathing. There's all types of breath work and it has different effects on our physiology, but uh, that's just always a great place to center and on your heart. You can also just put your attention on your heart and just watch your breath there. Meaning just notice, keep your awareness there. And then when your mind goes off into a thought, oh, all the things I have to do today, you just notice that and you just bring your awareness, bring your awareness back to your heart and then just watch your breath, watch your chest rising and falling. Oh, there goes my mind again. Oh, I'm going to bring it back. And there's great studies on, just putting your awareness on your heart and how that calms us down. So I love how the science is really validating, so many of these things. And again, we always have our breath. We always have our heart, and
Right.
so we just
Right.
put your attention there. First thing when you get up and, before you go to bed. And it's not about being self-critical, right? We all do that. I've done that too. Like sometimes I just get into a, rabbit hole of like, oh, I was looking up something and then that just led to a bunch of,
Yep.
other videos and other whatever. But then I can still, that's not the last thing I do before I go to bed, right? I can still put that away and then do many there are many practices that we talk about in the book, putting oil on your bottom of your feet, doing some aromatherapy, just to induce that grounding and calming your nervous system, and then doing some breathing before bed. So those things should be the last things you do before bed, even if your day wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, it's like what I've learned on my journey, it's the compounding of these habits.
Yes.
The breath work, the meditation, the yoga. What you're talking about is bringing people into this state of calmness. And when you're in a state of calmness, you're magnetic. Like you can truly connect to purpose. You can connect
Yes.
to your reason for being and existing and attract a more beautiful life for yourself. I just fully believe that. I believe that's why I've been able to have the journey that I'm on is because I slow down and I listen and I ask, well, what does Remy need right now? What's going to bring me more excitement and freedom in my life? Okay, let's follow that. But when we're waking up or we're operating out of a place of scatteredness or fear or doubt, and sometimes fear, and we'll get into that in a second because you touched on this in your article is a powerful thing, but um, we just gotta learn to slow down, and that's something we always talk about on this show and this experience and in coaching. It's just like it starts in the body. It starts
Yeah,
in the body.
absolutely. Yeah, it's like the more we do and fill the space, like that space is where we connect, right? But if we're filling the space with talking and doing and the next thing and running here and running there and social media, we can never hear our own voice, our inner voice that whispers, right? Our ego mind is very loud and, it's just reflecting all the things we hear around us since we were kids. Like, you have to do more, you have to be better, whatever, all the things, right? The monkey mind that comes from the outside, but it's loud. Um,
Yeah.
until you start meditating and just being comfortable with silence and connecting inward and asking the right questions. Like you said, it's really about asking yourself the right questions. And one of the meditations that I, we teach at the Chopra Center and Deepak kind of, um, sort of created is at the beginning of the meditation, you just focus on your heart and you
Hmm.
ask simple questions. Who am I? And you don't answer it. This isn't a thinking practice. It's a, self-inquiry. You just put the question out there and you let it go and you might hear something, you might not in the moment, but you will later. Who am I? What do I want? What is my purpose? And, we also use what am I grateful for? So you just ask the question and you just let it go. And you sit and, and then you ask the next question. Silence and space are really everything. And, again, if there's something that we want, we can, if we can put that out there and then that's what will come back. Right. And if we aren't in a good space to receive, our vibrations just all chaotic, then the perfect thing could show up and we wouldn't even know it. So it really does start with our own work on ourselves.
Mm. I want to get
Absolutely.
into kind of the final segment of this podcast and talk about something you mentioned is the jewels are on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
I would love to hear what that means to you and just how we can apply that into our own lives.
Yeah, so it kinda ties back to what you had asked a while ago about, with David and Deepak and what did they some of the pearls, that they taught and, so many things, but, uh, stepping into uncertainty and stepping into fear, and we can't do that, honestly, sometimes it's easier said than done when we aren't like you said, it's cumulative, you have to be doing other practices to make it real. Otherwise, you say these things to people and they're like, what do I can't do that. So there was a time in my life when I wasn't as tapped in. I wasn't as aligned with my purpose. I thought I was, but like public speaking, I never wanted to do that. I was like, I would run the other way and I did everything I could to avoid that. And when I started working at the Chopra Center, I was doing consults. And one day, Dr. Simon said, oh, we need you to teach. We would have 20 or 30 people come every week to the center and doing programs and cleanses and things, and they would get a lecture every day. And he said, "Oh, well, we need you to do the lecture this week." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you want me to stand in front of people and talk? I've been running away from this my whole life." And I did it because it wasn't about me, and that I think is a big one. It's about something coming through me. And for me, it's
Yes.
Ayurveda. For me, that's my
Yep.
passion. And I feel like that's what the world needs. And I'm just this vessel that's bringing it. And I just stepped into that. And then another friend of mine, because I was in the beginning, I was speaking and teaching from my mind, which was fine and great. It was good information. Um, but when she taught me, and Dr. Simon would do this, and so he would say, just speak from your heart. And again, it took me a while to figure out what that meant, but I would just bring in like people in my world and, that were my teachers or people that were important to me and just bring them into my heart. And I would just say, please just allow me. And silently, I would do this little thing, to, um, transmit this information and bring somebody something that they need, so
Yes.
someone in the group. So you
Love
have
it.
to step out of it and not make it about you.
Mhm.
And then it just opened up this world where I really enjoy it. I love talking about Ayurveda and sharing it and knowing that it's helping people. And then the next step after that was writing. And same thing. I never thought of myself as a writer. It was kind of scary and vulnerable. Speaking is also, but writing it's out there. It's in print, right?
Yeah.
And I was doing something one day at the center. I had to write a handout for the guests to use, like a little journaling practice. And Dr. Simon had asked me to create one for this program. So I did. And he said, oh, well, can you read it to me? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I did. And he just said, you're a good writer. And first of all, I had never heard those words. Even if I did, I don't know if I would have believed it. And but again, this is the importance of coaches or mentors to see something in you that maybe you don't see. And he said, you should do more of it. And so that was many years ago. But, I think then when this project came up, the opportunity, I did feel some fear. But again, that's just something to look at. I'm not my fear. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my emotions.
Yes.
Something's coming up here. I can look at that. I can examine it. I can observe it. I can move through it, you know? And that's what kind of I was saying, like, now on the other side of that, um, that's where, the jewels are. That's where you start to awaken to your full potential because fear can make us not do many things. And sometimes it is and this is where intuition and meditating and everything is really important because sometimes there is actually a threat there, right? And we want to pay attention because that's what it's just a signal from our ego mind. This feels threatening, is it? And then we can take that and we can examine it, right? In the Vedic tradition, there's I love it. There's all these little stories. So there's a story about like our conditioned mind, right? So if I'm conditioned, like I'm not a good speaker, I'm not a good writer, whatever. So the opportunity can come up. And if you don't examine it, you run the other way. So there's a story, where there's, someone standing there, and out of the corner of their eye, they see what they think is a snake, right? And so our first instinct is fight, flight, freeze, but then we need to, and we might need to do that, but you look at it and you examine it. And if it is something to be afraid of, yeah, you get out of there.
Yep.
But sometimes you look at it and it's just a coiled up rope. And you're like, oh, that's just a coiled up rope. I don't have to be afraid of that. So that's kind of what I did, right? Like I thought, oh my gosh, like initially I just froze. I was like, I can't do that. And then
Yeah.
I took it and I looked at it, and it took me some time. Again, it's not an overnight thing always, because we have all the stuff from our childhood. That thing that one person said to us, that thing that teacher said to us, that thing society told us. And and then that's where you do some reflection and contemplation, and you say, is that true? And uh, you know, and is that really something to be afraid of? And if not, you're likely to find some real gems on the other side of that fear. So it's not easy, but there's lots of people out there that talk about this, but it's it's about being uncomfortable in uncertainty. And some of that comes from, like what Deepak talks about in these spiritual concepts, is that uncertainty is potential. And if we start to just shift our mindset around uncertainty, we're like, oh, I don't know what this is going to feel like.
Mm,
But we
I love
automatically
that.
go to like avoiding that. But if we say, I don't know what this is going to look like, that's kind of exciting. You know, there's potential here to do something that, is great. So just being comfortable with uncertainty and being comfortable with discomfort. That's why a lot of these wise people say these things, and it's really true. And I would agree with you. I think people that are on this path, it's really hard to believe it when you haven't, started. So I just tell people, just start somewhere, and all of these principles of nature that are true, you'll start to see them more and more in your life, and I think everyone I've ever met on this journey, spiritual journey, will say like what you said, like, oh yeah, manifestation starts to happen, and little synchronicities where, you ask the right questions, and maybe you set some intentions, and then you let it go. You don't try to force it. And then all of a sudden, one day, something will come into your awareness. And as long as you're not all chaotic, you'll see it. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's, that came in for me. So it's just an amazing, magical process, I think. It's makes life more fun. And, we are here for a purpose. I find, really the most happiness comes from, and there's studies people have done on purpose. We have more happiness when we are living our purpose. And I think we start to meet more like-minded people when we start on our purpose along that path. And then we have healthier relationships, and that makes us physically healthier. There are these big studies that, have been published on people who have healthier relationships in their midlife, are healthier as they get older. And I feel really lucky that I found that, through the Chopra community, uh, a huge community of like-minded individuals, and that, we support each other, and um, I'm healthier for it. So,
So powerful. This
yeah,
this the conversation, your energy, your wisdom, it's powerful, and just appreciate the time and the energy. And this all comes back to the common mission that we both share of maximizing human potential. And I
absolutely.
honestly started to ask myself, like, my purpose is, how much can I grow? How how powerful can I become as an individual? And I think that is the most simple human just purpose and why that we can have is it's you.
Yes,
How great can you become?
exactly.
How excellent can life be? So I think that I think sometimes we feel that pressure to have this crazy why, this crazy mission.
Absolutely.
Um, but sometimes it can just be that simple.
Yeah, one thing that I just love that Deepak taught once, with these soul questions I mentioned, because there's different layers, right? It can be, who am I as a body? Who am I, as like the titles and positions, that we put on ourselves. But there's a bigger who am I? And what do I want? And, of course, when we're in the world, we need answers that are of the world, right? But
Hmm.
ultimately, who am I? I am pure consciousness. I am pure
Hmm.
potential. I am infinite creativity. I am infinite potential. Like that's who I am, right? And then what do I want? I want to know myself as that. Like that's
Mm.
ultimately what we want, right? And that's kind of what you're saying. Like I want to know myself as this infinitely creative, you know, pure potential, full of possibility, being. What is my purpose? My purpose, I'm here to know myself as that. And what am I grateful for, so that I'm able to, you know, have that journey of understanding who I really am. And I really liked that because that's what it comes down to. Just what you said is like, how can I understand myself as this amazing, powerful, not in an ego way, right? So that's something,
Of
we always have to
course.
distinguish. But as this just infinitely creative, loving, blissful being, and that's our journey is to know ourselves as that.
It's true embodiment, and that's sort of like the last step that I coach my clients through is, you know, the individuals now identify their vision for their life. They now understand what's holding them back from creating that life, the limiting beliefs that we really got into. And that last step is, okay, who do you need to become?
Mhm.
And it's really in the daily habits. It's in those micro habits that allow us to maximize potential and become that infinite
Absolutely.
being of limitless potential. So
Yeah, like you said, people think it's like some grand thing that we do, but it's really in all the little things that we do that make us, move and into that. And that's great. I mean, you're like you said, you guide people toward asking themselves the right questions. Because if we don't ask the right questions, we're not going to get the answers,
yeah,
Yeah, so that's great. And I'm a big fan of coaching and mentorship and all of those things that allow us to kind of step into who we are. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Well,
great.
closing this out, here on Journey to the Oasis, we see the Oasis as that space of truth, freedom, and alignment. Sheila, what does your Oasis look like right now?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it's really just being in the moment and following my passion. And and when you do that, coming from a space of love, then yeah, then you're living in that oasis. You're living in that alignment, with who you are. And yeah, so I think it's just being present and going back to what we talked about, those two things on a daily basis, I think, is this interfering with me being who I really am, or is this something that supports me being
Yeah,
who I truly am?
that's
And
great.
that's it. Yeah, and if you can know the difference, um, then you're where you need to be. You're in the oasis.
Yeah, 100%. That's beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your wisdom, your heart, and your presence with us today. This conversation reminds us that true healing isn't something we chase, it's something we remember. Through Ayurveda, meditation, and conscious living, you've shown how ancient wisdom can help us awaken new levels of health, purpose, and connection in a world that often forgotten its stillness. It's an honor to have you here in the Oasis and to walk beside you in this movement of reimagining what human potential truly looks like. To everyone listening, may you take these teachings, slow down, reconnect with yourself, and remember that everything you're seeking is already within you. Because when you heal from within, you step closer to your oasis. And from there, a new reality awaits. Thank you so
Beautiful.
much.
Thank you for everything you do.
Yeah, likewise, my friend.